Everybody, welcome back to another exciting video. Today I'm going to be inking the cover for issue 2 of Annabelle and just going over some of the supplies that I use here. Nothing super fancy. These are all alcohol based, felt tip marker, pens, whatnot. These two here, not even going to try to pronunciate the brand name there, but I found these online, really great. They have a couple different tips and they're almost like a soft brush tip. And one's a hard tip, one was a soft tip, as you saw. And I like to use those a lot for outlines and, just different line weights and things like that. Here I'm just kind of showing you, how each pen really works on paper that I use. Some of those brush pens here, they can go pretty thin and you have that nice control of thick to thin. And I like doing that. And you'll see in this piece here, how I go about kind of creating line weights, creating depth, doing different things. With this Copic marker here, you can go thin to thick as well. I will use that occasionally, but it does get much more thicker than I prefer. And that was me coloring everything in. So this is the piece that we're gonna go ahead and get going on. And yeah, so let's get into this one here. I usually start out with a number 303, and that's a very basic, kind of just a nice in-between line weight for me. I really like to go in and just start fleshing everything out. I don't really do the blacks until last, mainly being left-handed. You just got to take things like that in consideration. If I was working with like actual ink, it would be kind of a different process as well from doing this, because these alcohol-based felt tip pens, they do dry pretty quick, and the paper does soak up a lot of the ink, which is nice because then, as again, left-handed, you can, have a couple minutes or so and you can put your hand back onto some of the inked parts and it not smear. The smearing of real ink is definitely problematic. It's just something you end up working around. I know people that are right-handed, we have our processes and ways and how we go about trying not to smear ink, on our pages. So right now I'm just working on, the skulls, and I sped this film up, the video pretty quick, just so it's not like a several hour video of me inking real time. But, going in, doing these skulls, I thought it was kind of cool to have Annabelle sitting on some skulls, curves in the background. So this is kind of just the continuation of the end of issue 1. And, when I say I like to go in and flesh everything out, I do add a lot of detail in the first pass. I pick up a lot of the pencil detail that's there, and I will sometimes, a lot of the times I will go back and keep adding in more detail until I'm really comfortable and I feel good about the piece as a whole. And then as I'm inking pieces, there's things that I think about. I try to always think about everything, but we just don't always do that. And I can go back and say, oh, I need to create a little bit more depth in this area, or maybe I need to add a shadow in this area. And that happens, when I color as well. Just trying to keep, be mindful as much as I can about how a character is sitting, not just the anatomy or proportions or things like that, spacing of things. There's a tremendous amount to kind of think about when I'm doing a piece of art. And it does get a little bit easier over time as you start to get comfortable with your style, you get comfortable with, anatomy, and get comfortable with different characters and objects and things that you're drawing. It can become a little bit quicker, but at first, I get it. It can be very daunting. I wanted to show the original Annabelle character as she showed up in the first Ice Pick comic when I was a teenager. This is kind of like after Ice Pick was dealing with some bad guys there, you got, some crazy stuff going on, and he starts to have these flashback scenes, and these are, albeit the original flashback scenes, got a few demons in the background. Annabelle's there with blonde hair, ended up changing that to brunette, and, not really explaining much going on in this really terribly drawn flashback scene. And then it kind of continues and he wakes up and she's standing there, that was that was a very young teenage Todd drawing her. Now she's got purple hair. I don't know how it changed from blonde to purple. That's just ended up like, maybe it was a hair dye color day. But, and then she just like helps him up and like leaves. And ET's like, what's going on, man? So he's got his little flower and she walks away and he's just like a bloody tear. I don't know why I put a bloody tear on him, but it was the 90s. Like everything was crazy and over the top. So we'll get back into the drawing. So that was really where Annabelle showed up in the first appearance. Those pages and that whole story actually is part of the Ice Pick Definitive Edition trade paperback that was on Kickstarter a while ago. Still available for purchase. And anybody that sees me at shows, or if you're out there on social media, you want to check out those pages and that story. I will say it's terribly drawn, and the work balloons, I apologize, it was just like not even legible once you start inking in the letters and the words, and then you realize like, oh, here's a marker and it smears some of the letters. It's fun to see the origins of Ice Pick Annabelle. Luke wasn't even a part of that in that story at all. He came in definitely much later. But back to this piece, I'm working on the fire in his mouth. Love drawing fire. It's always fun. It's fluid. You can just kind of fire has a life of its own. And you can make it go anywhere. Working on some of his scales and getting to the dragon part. And as you see here, I do outline a lot of the blacks, and I'll go in with one of the pen markers and kind of flesh out, like thicken up those outlines, and then I can go back in and darken everything up, fill in all the blacks, create all those line weights to kind of help pull Annabelle a little bit forward, leaving Kerr a little bit more in the background. Here I am working on his face, and again, it's kind of loose in the sense that like I'm going in there, catching all the lines that I had in penciled, knowing that I'm probably going to go back in, add a little bit more detail, thicken up the lines, and really, pay much more attention to the individual pieces of this complete page, this cover. Right here, I just want to get a lot of the general shapes in and just focus on that. And for me, that's my process. I do, as if you've seen, prior videos here with some of my penciling, I talk about how I do it. It's a kind of layered, multi-process phase type of artwork where I'll go in one layer, lightly erase that for pencils, and then do another layer, maybe lightly erase that again, then go back in for another final layer. Same thing with my inks. I go in with the 03. Sometimes I switch up if I need to go a little thinner, a little thicker, and then I'm going back in with that felt pen here, the brush pen, and really thickening up her hair, really helping that. There's a lot of shadows in hair, especially if it's brunette and it's kind of naturally lit. Giving her this nice thick outline, and knowing that a lot of that is going to be black as well. But you see here, I'm thickening up those shadowed lines, and that's just going to make it a lot easier, and for me a lot quicker to color in all those blacks once I get to that point. Creating a little bit of depth here, a little bit of cross hatching, and you'll see, and if you saw the color piece, that's actually going to be an upcoming video, me showing the coloring process and talking a little bit about that, quite a bit about that. And then, if you check out any of those social media, I'm there. I just posted this cover, and you get to see the final color piece there. But going in and just continuing to fill in, outline all these blacks, and we'll get filling these blacks here in a little bit. But also just being mindful of how I want things to look, how I want with her arm and her stomach. You don't want to have a lot of open space necessarily, and if you do leave that open space, then, for me, how I would color that is I would put a darker color back there to have this nice contrast. So I will typically add contrast with inks and coloring as well, because I do end up coloring a lot of my pieces, and that's just something, again, to be mindful when you're, doing art, creating art. Think about all these different things. And a lot of that was taught to me while I was in school, high school, college, just to really drill home those, thoughts that you should be thinking about, things that you should think about when you're drawing stuff or painting or creating art in general. Doing this nice little like feathering effect here on the rock formations coming down. I go in there and kind of thicken up some of the outlines, create a little bit of line weight on those. They're not important, so I don't spend a ton of time doing anything and detailing them in. But I really like that little feathered effect. It kind of creates like a little bit more atmosphere with just the inks. You're creating a little bit more depth. And each stage, as I do artwork, each stage has its own way that I create depth, whether it's a layout, trying to get shapes and forms down, then, that goes into the pencil stage. And then I try to, again, create more depth and just try to continue to have these different areas that create depth. To me, a lot of it is about depth. It's about separation of planes. And a lot of these terms artists talk about all the time. And, it's because these are important terms, when you have different planes, people exist on different planes, figuratively, literally, when we're looking at something, our eye focuses on the foreground, middle ground, and background. And that's really what I do. Even when I'm inking in the various stages, I am just thinking about what's important, what's less important or more important, and how can I, in a way, emphasize that. Here I am going and filling all these blacks. This is with the felt, the big fat side of the marker. If I get those nice fat outlines, it makes it a little bit easier for me just to use the thickest part of the marker to get it colored in. So I'm not sitting there trying to, use a thin marker to color in big black spaces. I know digitally this can be done very, very quickly at a click of a button there. But for me, I do like the traditional pen to ink type of look and feel. I love drawing on paper. Really will try to do that as long as I can. I always like to have that actual traditional pen to paper type of artwork. But wrapping up these blacks here, and this is getting really close to the end of this piece. And I really appreciate everybody here checking out this piece. This is the cover for Annabelle issue 2. The Kickstarter is going to be going live here next month. With these blacks getting filled in, say if you haven't, click that like button, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. It really does help out this channel. I really appreciate all the support here. Be on the lookout for the Kickstarter. We're just wrapping up a few of the fine lines here, and we're going to call this piece done here in a little bit. And I will hope to see you on the next video.